This Christmas, while I fought to save lives in the ER, my 16-year-old daughter was turned away at my parents' door. They said there was no room, not at the table, not in the house, not even in their hearts. She drove herself home in the dark and ate a cold piece of toast alone. I didn't shout, I didn't beg, but by the next morning, my parents found a letter on their doorstep and everything changed. They thought they could break me. They thought I wouldn't fight back. But they forgot one thing. I'm not the scared little girl they used to silence. I'm Emma's mother now, and I'm done staying quiet. The hospital hallways still echoed in my bones as I turned the key and stepped into the quiet house. My scrubs smelled faintly of antiseptic. My wrists sore from hours of chest compressions, my mind replaying the moment a man looked at me with blue-tinted lips and said, "I'm just tired." He almost died saying that. We brought him back barely. It had been that kind of shift, the kind that stripped you raw, the kind that demanded you stay strong long after you wanted to fall apart. I was expecting silence, maybe some leftover blinking Christmas lights or a voicemail from my husband checking in. I wasn't expecting what I found. Emma's boots were by the door. That stopped me cold. They were lined up perfectly, like she'd taken them off carefully, like she didn't want to track in snow. The coat she wore to Grandma's house was tossed over the armrest, the soft pink one she picked out just for tonight. A small gift-wrapped tin sat beside it, the one she spent hours filling with cookies for her little cousins. Her overnight bag, the one she packed 2 days ago with way too much thought, still sat zipped on the floor. Everything about the scene felt wrong. My heart did a strange little skip, the kind it usually saves for when the ER overhead speakers announce a trauma case. I scanned the room quickly. There was no noise, no music, no lights, no signs of joy or celebration, just quiet. Then I saw her. Emma was curled up on the couch, her body bent in that tight, defensive way, knees to chest, arms wrapped around herself, as if she was still bracing for something. Her dress, the burgundy velvet one she was so excited to wear, was wrinkled and bunched beneath her. Her mascara was smudged, her cheeks blotchy, like she'd been crying for hours, and then gave up halfway through. She looked like someone who had been turned into a guest in her own life. I didn't speak at first. My hand hovered over the light switch, unsure if turning it on would make this moment worse. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be at my parents' house, surrounded by cousins, laughter, and the traditional chaos of Christmas Eve. "Emma," I whispered. Her eyes fluttered open instantly, like she hadn't really been sleeping, just pretending to be still. "Eh," she said, her voice barely audible. "What? What are you doing here?" She sat up slowly. "I came home." "But why? They said there wasn't any room." The words hit harder than they should have. There wasn't any room, as if she were an afterthought, as if there hadn't been a plan for weeks, as if she hadn't begged to drive herself just this once to prove she could be responsible, as if she weren't part of the family. I opened my mouth to ask more, but something else caught my eye. On the coffee table, next to a crumpled tissue, sat a single piece of toast, half-eaten, dry, bent at the edges, and half a banana beside it. That was her dinner on Christmas Eve. She followed my gaze and offered a sad smile. I wasn't really hungry, my chest ached. It was the kind of ache that doesn't come from fatigue or hunger, but from watching your child carry a pain they don't deserve. The kind that starts deep in the marrow and works its way outward until your fingertips feel it, until your breath catches. She looked up at me again, blinking hard. "I didn't want to bother you. I just didn't know where else to go." I sat down beside her, placed my arm gently around her shoulders, and felt her lean into me, like a collapsing wall, finally giving in. No words could undo what had happened. No apology could erase the shame written across her face. But I could sit here. I could hold her. I could start with that. I didn't speak right away. I just sat there, one arm around her shoulders, the other still trembling from adrenaline that hadn't quite burned off from my shift. Her head rested against me, and for a long moment I pretended she was just tired, that this was normal, that nothing had gone wrong. but we both knew better. After a while, Emma shifted slightly, sitting up just enough to grab a tissue from the end table. She dabbed at the corner of her eye, more habit than necessity. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. I got there right on time. I nodded slowly, unsure where this was going, unsure if I even wanted to know. I even parked perfectly, she said, trying to laugh, but it came out as more of a cough. I was proud of that parallel parking on the first try, thought Grandma would notice. She paused, but when I knocked, she looked surprised, like she didn't expect me. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Told me the house was full this year, said there were already too many people. I closed my eyes. She said she wasn't sure where I'd sit, and that there were no beds left for overnight, but it was more than that. Her hands twisted together in her lap. It wasn't that they forgot to plan for me, it felt like they planned around me. Her words didn't just land, they lodged. "What do you mean?" I asked softly. Emma bit her lip. "Well, when I peeked into the dining room, I saw Lily. She was sitting in my usual spot. Lie, Melissa's daughter. I figured maybe Grandma moved the seating, no big deal. So I asked where I should go, and Grandma just sighed like I'd asked for something difficult. My jaw clenched. She pointed to a folding chair in the corner and said they might try to squeeze me in later. But then Aunt Melissa looked at me and said, "Lily's already been here for hours. It'd be confusing to shift everyone now, like I was the problem. Twist the knife, why don't you?" They said I could just grab a plate and eat in the kitchen if I really wanted, but when I went in there wasn't anything left but the side dishes. Someone took the pie I brought. No one even mentioned it. I looked at her again, at her dress, her shoes, the way she'd done her hair. She had put effort into this. She wanted to belong tonight, and they made sure she didn't. I didn't want to cause trouble, Emma continued, so I just stood there for a bit. No one really talked to me. Grandpa didn't even look up. Grandma kept saying how full the house was, how she wasn't expecting another mouth. She winced at the word mouth, like I was just extra weight. Her voice dropped even lower. And then Melissa said, "If she's really uncomfortable, maybe it's best she head back. Claire will be home soon anyway." Like it was reasonable, like I was just passing through. That was the moment where something inside me buckled and burned at once. They didn't ask how I got there, didn't offer to drive me. I just left. I breathed out slowly, feeling the walls of our house close in with a kind of cruel quiet. "And then you made toast," she gave a small nod. Didn't want to eat anything real, didn't feel hungry, just felt tired. No teenager should ever have to say that on Christmas Eve. I stood up briefly and walked to the kitchen. The crust of the toast still sat on a paper towel like a monument to everything unsaid. The banana half had browned. I opened the fridge out of habit, though I knew what I'd find. Nothing festive, nothing planned. We hadn't prepared because we trusted them. That was our mistake. Back in the living room, Emma looked up at me. "I know they don't like you," she said softly, "but I thought I was just a kid, that it didn't matter." Her voice shook, but tonight, it felt like they wanted me to know I wasn't really part of them. I sat down beside her again, taking her hand this time, her fingers curled around mine instinctively. No one deserved to feel like an outsider in their own family, especially not her. I didn't speak, I didn't promise revenge, but somewhere deep inside, I knew a shift had begun, and it wouldn't end quietly. I didn't sleep that night, not really. I sat at the edge of my bed long after Emma had finally gone to her room, still wearing that velvet dress, too exhausted to change. The house was dark, quiet, but my mind refused to settle. Instead, it wandered backward into the parts of my life I'd locked away for survival. I was 7 the first time my mother looked at me like I was wrong. It was spring. I had found a dead bird outside, and while most kids would have screamed or cried, I'd picked it up gently and asked if I could dissect it. I didn't want to hurt it. It was already gone. I just wanted to understand how wings worked, how something so fragile could once fly. I remember the way my mother slammed her hand on the kitchen counter and shouted, "Jesus, Claire, what is wrong with you?" She didn't say it with fear, she said it with disgust. My sister Melissa, older by 3 years and always quick to perform, started crying on cue, screaming that I was trying to bring the bird back to life like some freaky science zombie. The nickname started that day, Claire the Creep, Dr. Freak. It stuck like gum on a shoe. Hard to scrape off, harder to ignore. I wasn't trying to be weird. I just saw the world differently. I read books meant for kids twice my age. I watched documentaries while the other girls watched cartoons. I asked too many questions at dinner. My dad would groan every time I brought up anatomy or the circulatory system. "We're eating, Claire," he'd mutter. "Can't you talk normal for once?" At school, teachers praised me. At home, I was the problem. When I said I wanted to be a doctor, I expected resistance. I just didn't expect it to hurt so much. My mum didn't argue. She didn't laugh. She just looked at me with that blank, tired stare and said, "That's ambitious." Not encouraging, not supportive, just flat, like she was already bracing herself for my failure. Melissa, meanwhile, flourished in being ordinary. She was the pretty one, the charming one, the relatable one. She made people laugh. She told stories that were mostly lies, but entertaining enough that no one cared. And she always made sure to paint herself as the sister trying to help her awkward little genius survive in the real world. I hated that phrase. Every time I aced a test, Melissa rolled her eyes. Every time I stayed up late studying, she called me extra. When I got into my first choice for college on a full scholarship, my mum didn't hug me. She just asked if I thought I'd ever find a husband because men don't like women who are too smart. I didn't answer her then. I didn't know how. I paid for school myself, worked graveyard shifts as a waitress while dissecting cadavers by day, slept in spurts, lived on caffeine and stubbornness. My parents never visited, never saw me graduate. Melissa didn't even send a card, but somehow they all kept tabs on me. And when I finally made it, got my white coat, my first real job, they all had something to say. "Must be nice to have everything," my mum would murmur, just loud enough for me to hear. "Dr. Moneybags," Melissa called me after I bought my first used car that didn't stall at red lights. They wanted me to succeed, but only in ways that didn't threaten their comfort. Only in ways that still let them feel superior. Looking back, I can't remember a time when I felt truly celebrated by them. Not for who I was, not for what I built with my own hands. I was tolerated, sometimes admired from a distance, but never embraced. And now they had done it again, this time to my daughter. Emma, who'd never hurt a soul. Emma, who made cookies and wore the sweater her grandmother once complimented. Emma, who had just wanted to be part of a tradition she thought still included her. I clenched my jaw and stared out the window into the winter night. Maybe this had always been coming. Maybe I just didn't want to see it. But now I did. And once you see clearly, there's no going back. Even after everything they'd said and done, I still tried to do right by them. Some part of me, probably the part still craving approval that never came, believed that if I just gave enough, they'd finally see me, appreciate me, love me the way I needed them to. So I did what they never asked, but always expected. When their landlord raised the rent again, I stepped in and bought them a modest 2-bedroom house. Nothing fancy, but clean, safe, in a quiet neighborhood. I handled the down payment, the mortgage, the insurance. I told them it was a gift. They didn't have to worry about anything. They never said thank you. They moved in like they owned the place, which legally they didn't. But I didn't correct them. I let them have that illusion, thinking it would bring peace. I even paid the utilities, the cable bill, their medical premiums when Medicare fell short. Whenever Mum called to say her blood pressure meds weren't covered, I made the calls, covered the copays. Whenever Dad needed another dental cleaning, I sent over my insurance info. I didn't complain, not once. Even when they called at the worst times, even when I was in the middle of a shift, even when they didn't ask, they just expected. It became the rhythm of our relationship. They called, I paid until I stopped. It began with a summer camp. Melissa's daughter Chloe had gotten into some exclusive STEM program, one of those overpriced, high-pressure, networking-fueled camps that promise to shape your future if you can afford it. Melissa called me like she already had the answer in hand. "You'll cover it, right?" she said, her voice sugary sweet. "It's just 2,200. That's nothing for you." That sentence, "nothing for you," landed like a slap. Emma never asked for anything like that, never hinted, never assumed. She'd passed up opportunities that cost a fraction of that because she knew I was already stretched. Emma was practical, thoughtful, quiet, and Chloe got to be brilliant and expensive because her mum knew how to manipulate the narrative. "I can't," I said, calm but firm. "I'm already covering the house, the bills, everything. Maybe look into financial aid or payment plans." Melissa didn't skip a beat. "Wow," she scoffed. "Must be nice to have everything and still be stingy." That wasn't the worst part. She added, "You're just jealous Chloe's going places. She's got your brain, but at least she knows how to use it." It would have been laughable if it hadn't come from the same woman who used to call me a freak for liking science. But it wasn't funny. It was bitter. It was calculated. And it was personal. A week later, I drove over to the house to drop off a package they'd mistakenly had delivered to my address. I was exhausted from back-to-back shifts, still in scrubs, no makeup, hair in a loose bun. I wasn't planning to stay long. As I walked up the driveway, I heard my mother's voice, loud, theatrical, and echoing across the yard. "Oh yes, we bought this house years ago, scraped together every penny. Robert worked overtime, and I gave up vacations for a decade, but it was worth it." She was talking to a neighbor, smiling wide, telling a beautiful, complete lie. I stood there stunned. She knew I was coming. She knew I was 5T away, but she said it anyway, like I didn't exist. Like all those payments were imaginary, like my name on the deed meant nothing, like the years of sacrifice I'd poured into that home were inconvenient details in the fairy tale she preferred to tell. That's when it clicked. It wasn't about gratitude. It wasn't even about me. It was about the story they wanted to tell. And I didn't fit, and Emma, she didn't either. She wasn't loud enough, charming enough, demanding enough. She was too much like me in all the ways they didn't understand. And just like me, she became the invisible one, the extra mouth, the girl without a chair. That night I made a decision, not out of anger, but clarity. The kind of clarity that comes after years of being pushed to the edge and finally realizing you can step away instead of waiting to be pulled back in. I didn't scream, I didn't call, I didn't send a furious text message laced with all the words I'd swallowed over the years. That wasn't me anymore. That kind of reaction would only feed the narrative they love to write. That I was emotional, unstable, too sensitive. No, this time I would respond in the only language they understood, action. The next morning, before the sun rose, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold and a blank sheet of paper in front of me. Emma was still asleep, her room finally quiet after a night that had robbed her of joy. James had left for his own shift at the fire station, but before he walked out the door, he rested a hand on my shoulder. Nothing spoken, just a quiet solidarity. I picked up a pen and started writing. The words came slowly at first, then all at once, sharp, deliberate, each sentence measured like a scalpel. I didn't write with fury. I wrote with certainty. No insults, no pleading, just facts. I told them what happened. I described in exact terms how Emma had arrived on time, how she had prepared cookies and dressed in the sweater her grandmother once said she liked, how she stood in a doorway expecting love and received indifference, how she ate a slice of toast alone while they laughed over turkey and pie. I didn't accuse, I didn't label anyone cruel or heartless. I didn't need to. The truth was damning enough. Then I made it clear I would no longer be funding the house, the utilities, the extras. I would fulfill any remaining legal responsibilities, but nothing more. The support, the help, the quiet financial safety net I'd provided for years. It was done. not as punishment, as consequence. I ended the letter with one simple line. A child turned away at Christmas remembers that absence forever, and so will I. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in a plain envelope, and addressed it to no one. They'd know exactly who it was for. Then I drove. Their neighborhood was still blanketed in early morning fog, the Christmas lights blinking through mist like tired eyes. 2 cars sat in the driveway. One belonged to Melissa. I recognized her vanity plate, loud and bright as always. The other was unfamiliar, probably a cousin or friend who'd stayed over to enjoy leftovers. I didn't knock. I walked up the path slowly, the envelope clutched in my hand. There was a time I might have hesitated, might have reconsidered, but that time was gone. I knelt by the door and slid the envelope beneath the mat, pressing it flat so it wouldn't catch the breeze. Then I turned and walked away, not fast, not angry, just done. Back in the car, I sat for a moment and stared at the house they claimed as theirs, the one I paid for, the one they filled with everyone except the girl who needed the most. I watched a curtain move. Maybe someone saw me, maybe not. It didn't matter. This wasn't about their reaction. It was about the boundary. For years, I had contorted myself to fit into a version of family that never really included me. I bought the house, paid the bills, showed up when they didn't, stayed quiet when I should have spoken. Let them rewrite history with me, edit it out, but not anymore. This letter wasn't revenge, it wasn't drama, it was a record, a line in the sand. A moment that said, I see what you did, and I won't let you do it again. That afternoon, Emma came into the kitchen with sleep still clinging to her face. She blinked at me over a bowl of cereal and asked, Are they going to say anything? I looked at her and said simply, They'll say plenty, but not to us. The call came just after noon. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew who it was. My mother never called from her own phone when she was angry. She always borrowed someone else's. Some twisted attempt at plausible deniability. I let it go to voicemail. Not 5 minutes later, my phone vibrated again. A different number, another call ignored. Then the text started. How could you do this to your own family? After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. Ungrateful doesn't even begin to cover it. They rolled in one after another, from my parents, from Melissa, even from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in over a year, but none of them mentioned Emma, not once. I sat on the couch reading each message like a case file. Cold, analytical, detached. They weren't upset about what they did. They were upset they'd been held accountable. And none of them had read the letter carefully. Or worse, they had and chose to ignore the one part that mattered most. Because in the final paragraph, after laying out everything, Emma's arrival, the toast, the empty seat, the full house, I had written something I meant with my whole heart. All it would take is an honest apology to Emma. One real effort to make this right, and we'll start over. We won't forget, but we'll forgive. This isn't about punishment, it's about recognition. Say her name, own what happened, that's all. But they didn't. Instead, they latched onto the word consequence like it was a threat. They twisted it into an attack. They called it disrespectful, hateful, cruel. Sandra left me a voicemail, long, breathless, and full of theatre. I cannot believe the audacity, Claire. After all the sacrifices we made, all the nights I stayed up worrying about you. This is how you treat your mother, a cold letter like some stranger. If you had a problem, you should have come to us directly, not this. She paused only to draw breath, then added, And for what? Because dinner was crowded. That's not cruelty, that's life. Grow up. Still no mention of Emma. Melissa's message was shorter but sharper. You've lost it completely. You need help, Claire, and if you think anyone's going to side with you over this, you're delusional. You always needed to be the center of attention. Guess you finally got your wish again. Emma's name never appeared. Even my father, who rarely spoke unless coached by my mother, sent a message that just read, You're no daughter of mine. That one should have hurt. But it didn't. Not really. Because the moment I realized they couldn't even say my child's name in their outrage, something inside me settled. They didn't forget Emma, they erased her. And that's when I understood the full shape of the truth. One I'd danced around for years, always too afraid to say aloud. My family had never accepted me, not truly. I was useful. I was convenient. I was the daughter who paid bills and stayed quiet. But I was never loved for who I was. And now that same treatment had extended to Emma. To them, she was an extension of me, nothing more. Not her own person, not a granddaughter, just collateral in a long-standing resentment they'd nursed like a grudge. And even when given a simple path to redemption, all they had to do was say sorry to a 16-year-old girl. They chose their pride. I deleted every message, blocked every number. I told myself I was done. But the truth was something deeper had shifted. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was clarity. I saw them clearly for the first time, not as family, but as people who had made a choice. And now so had I. That night, Emma sat beside me while we watched some cheesy holiday movie she didn't even like. Her head rested on my shoulder, her breath even and steady. She never asked if they'd replied, never mentioned the letter. Maybe she already knew. Maybe she didn't need to hear it because the silence said everything. The office smelled like paper and wood polish. Not unpleasant, just sterile in that distinctly legal way. I sat in a leather chair across from a lawyer named Coldwell, a man with silver temples and a voice so calm it made everything feel surgical. He listened as I laid it all out. Dates, payments, deeds, medical bills, proof of ownership. I handed him a folder that felt heavier than it should have, not because of the papers, but because of what they represented, years of unpaid gratitude. He didn't look surprised, just nodded as he scanned through documents like this was routine, which it probably was. Families falling apart over boundaries rarely made for interesting cases. I assume you want to proceed with formal eviction, he said, glancing up. Yes, and terminate all financial support. Yes, everything except what's legally required until they're out. He nodded again, made a note. 60-day. Notice. We'll file it tomorrow. You'll get a copy. That was it. Cold, efficient, exactly what I needed. I left the office without a second guess. But when I got home, James was waiting for me at the kitchen counter, a mug of coffee in one hand, the letter I'd left him in the other. You sure about this? He asked, eyes steady. I am. He exhaled slowly and set the mug down. I know they deserve it. Hell, I've wanted to say something to them for years, but it's permanent. Claire, I know. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You're not doing this out of spite, I shook my head. I'm doing this because I'm done being their safety net. They can't treat Emma like she doesn't exist and still expect me to pay their bills. James didn't argue, but I saw it in his eyes. That tiny flicker of worry, not for me, but for what this would mean. The fallout, the noise, the guilt that might sneak in later. I get it, I said quietly. They're still my parents, and this feels harsh. He nodded, reluctant a little. I didn't push back. Instead, I asked him something I hadn't dared to before. Will you talk to Emma? His brows furrowed. About what? About what happened? About how she feels? I think you need to hear it from her. He agreed without hesitation. That night after dinner, I saw them talking in the living room. Emma was curled into her usual spot on the couch, knees pulled up, a pillow hugged to her chest. James sat beside her, his tone soft, his expression open. I didn't listen in, I couldn't. Whatever they said to each other, it was theirs to share. But later, when he came to bed, he didn't speak for a while. He just crawled in beside me, pulled the covers up, and laid there staring at the ceiling. I was about to ask if he was okay when he whispered, "She said she felt disposable." The words hit me like a punch. She said it didn't feel like a mistake. He continued, said they looked her in the eye and made her feel like showing up was a burden, like she ruined their night just by existing. I didn't respond. I couldn't. James turned toward me then, his eyes dark with something that looked a lot like guilt. Whatever you need to do, Claire, I'm in. And that was it. No more hesitation, no more doubt. The next morning, I watched the legal notice print out from my home office. The sound of the printer clicking and feeding pages felt oddly final, like a clock striking midnight on a fairy tale that had dragged on too long. They had 60 days to vacate the property, and I had 60 days to reclaim my peace. She showed up at my front door the next morning. No call, no warning, just the unmistakable sound of her slippers on the porch and the violent jingle of our doorbell being pressed 3 times in a row like she could summon her way back into control. I looked through the peephole before I opened the door, already bracing for what I knew was coming. Sandra stood there in her holiday robe, the same one she always wore the day after Christmas, a faded red thing with white trim and a stain from cranberry sauce that never washed out. Clutched in her hand was the eviction letter, now crumpled and damp, like she'd been squeezing it since dawn. Her hair was wild, her face red, and her lips were pulled so tight they looked like they might snap. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. "You're really doing this," she hissed, eyes blazing. "You're throwing us out." I didn't answer. I wasn't going to justify myself. I'd already said everything that needed saying in that letter. After a beat of silence, she pushed past me anyway, marching into my foyer like she still had a right to everything under this roof. "You ungrateful little girl," she snapped. "After everything we've done for you, after all the sacrifices we made, this is how you repay us? A letter on the doorstep like some landlord?" I followed her in, but stayed quiet. The longer I didn't react, the more unhinged she became. "We raised you. We put a roof over your head, fed you, clothed you, God knows why, when all you ever did was act like you were better than the rest of us." That was always her angle, that my existence had been some great favor. "You're not the only person in this family with problems." "Claire," she continued, "you think being smart makes you righteous, makes you the judge of everyone else." Still, I said nothing. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. "You want to play cold and calculated?" she said, voice dropping to a bitter whisper. "Fine, 2 can play that game," she scrolled furiously, then shoved the phone into my face. A text thread from 3 years ago. The screen showed a message I barely remembered sending one night, long after a tense dinner when I had tried to bridge the gap between us. I had written, "I know I was always different. I'm sorry if I ever made you feel like I looked down on you. I never meant to, I just wanted to be understood." My stomach turned. Sandra smirked. Triumphant. "There, you admitted it. You knew you were difficult. You knew you were the problem. So don't pretend now that you're the victim. This is just more of the same. You trying to punish us for not being who you wanted us to be." I stared at her, stunned, not by the message itself, but by how she was using it. A moment of vulnerability twisted into a weapon, a private apology repurposed as evidence of guilt. That was her way, always had been. If I was kind, I was weak. If I apologized, I was admitting I deserved the treatment. If I tried to make peace, it meant the war was my fault. "I sent that message," I said quietly, "because I wanted to heal something that was already broken, not because I believed I deserved to be mistreated." She scoffed. "Oh, don't be dramatic. We didn't mistreat you. We raised you the best we could." "No," I said, "you raised me the way you understood, out of fear, out of shame, out of resentment. You never tried to know me, and now you're doing the same to Emma." At the mention of her name, Sandra flinched just for a second. "She's not even involved in this," she muttered. "She's the only one who matters in this," I snapped, finally losing the composure I'd clung to. "You made her feel disposable, and you're still pretending like this is about you, like you're the victim of my boundaries." Sandra's eyes narrowed. "We're your parents." "Exactly," I said, "which is why this hurts, but it doesn't make it excusable." She stood there a moment longer, defiant, chest heaving. Then she did something so theatrical, so childish, it would have been laughable if it hadn't been so sad. She tore the letter in half right there in my living room, slow and deliberate, as if the act could undo the contents. As if paper were the only thing holding this decision together, there she said, "Done." I stepped forward and opened the door wide. "No, Mum," I said, "it's just beginning." She didn't move for a second, like she expected me to back down, to soften, to say I didn't mean it, but I didn't. Eventually she stormed out, muttering curses under her breath, crumpled letter in hand, and as I closed the door behind her, something settled deep in my chest. Not satisfaction, not anger, relief. The official notice arrived 2 days later. The paper was thick, the font impersonal, and the wording precise. 60 days. Vacate the property. Failure to comply would lead to formal proceedings. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't even emotional. It was just the law. Finally catching up to a boundary I should have enforced years ago. The moment I saw the signature at the bottom, something inside me unclenched. It was done. The house was listed the following week, a modest 3-bedroom with new paint and a clean lawn, desirable to the right kind of buyer. I didn't jack up the price. I didn't play games. I wasn't trying to profit. I just wanted out. I told the agent, "No negotiations, vacant possession required." He raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Absolutely." There was no room for compromises. Now, in parallel, I sat down and gathered everything. Every receipt, every mortgage payment, every utility bill I'd covered. I pulled bank statements, screenshots of Zelle transfers, emails where I'd paid their copays and pharmacy charges, printouts of insurance authorizations, 7 years' worth of proof that I hadn't just supported them, I'd sustained them. Then I compiled it into a PDF and wrote a cover note. Since some stories are being rewritten, I thought the truth deserved a record of its own. This is for context, not sympathy. I sent it to 5 people, not to shame, not to gossip, just to protect myself from the lies I knew were coming. Aunt Rachel, cousin Nana, my dad's brother in Florida, Melissa's ex-husband who still talked to me on holidays, and Deb, a longtime family friend who once told me, "I know your mum can be a theatrical." Each email went out with no expectations, no request for a reply, just the facts. The silence that followed was deafening. Not angry, not accusatory, just still. For a few days, I imagined the worst, that they'd all ignored it, deleted it, believed Sandra's version instead, that I'd gone cold, ungrateful, cruel. But then, one by one, the responses trickled in from Nina. "Wow, I had no idea. Thank you for sharing. I'm so sorry, Cla." From Aunt Rachel. "I don't even know what to say. I always suspected things were hard for you, but this is eye-opening." From Deb. "If you need anything, I'm here. And you're not wrong. No one praised me for what I'd done, but no one condemned me either." And that mattered more than I realized because for the first time, I wasn't bracing for judgment. I wasn't explaining or justifying or trying to make them understand. I was simply stating facts, and the facts were enough. Meanwhile, the house listing went live. Within 48 hours, we had 3 offers. One of them, a young couple with a toddler and another baby on the way, submitted a letter alongside their bid. They talked about the swing set they wanted to build, the raised garden beds they dreamed of installing. They talked about a future. I accepted their offer that same afternoon. The final requirement, the house had to be empty by the closed date, which meant Sandra and Robert had a deadline, 60 days, not a minute more. At dinner that night, Emma stirred her pasta quietly before asking, "Do you think they'll actually leave?" I nodded. "They don't have a choice, and what if they call again?" "They won't," I said, "but if they do, I won't answer." She didn't respond right away. Then she said, "It's weird. I thought I'd feel bad. Do you?" She thought for a moment. "Not really, just sad. It had to be like this." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Me too. But some sadness I was learning was necessary, like pruning, like letting go of something dead so the rest could grow. It started with a phone call from a number I hadn't seen in over a decade. "Claire," a woman's voice said hesitantly, "it's Margot from high school and church. Your mum gave me your number. I hope that's okay." I paused. Margot had been one of those peripheral family friends, more my mother's ally than mine. We hadn't spoken since she moved across the state, but I could already hear the weight in her voice. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry about what's going on," she continued. I know it's none of my business, but your mum told me a few things. And, well, they didn't sit right. I didn't say anything. I let her talk. She said Emma showed up late, that she wasn't polite, that she rolled her eyes when Sandra asked her to wait in the kitchen. She said Emma made a scene. I wasn't there, obviously, but the way she said it, I don't know. It didn't sound like Emma, it wasn't, not even remotely. I kept my voice steady. "Margot, Emma didn't make a scene. She was told there wasn't room for her. She left without arguing. She didn't even cry until she got home." There was a long pause. I thought so. After we hung up, I felt a familiar twinge rise in my chest. Not grief, not anger, but exhaustion. That old weary ache of having to prove the truth when it should have spoken for itself. But this time, I had proof. A few nights earlier, I had come downstairs after Emma fell asleep and noticed her phone charging on the kitchen counter. I hadn't been snooping. I had only meant to plug it in properly when the screen lit up with a voice memo. It was short, just under a minute. She must have recorded it the night she got home, trying to process the moment. Or maybe she was going to send it to her friend and never did. Either way, I listened. The recording started with silence, broken only by the rustle of fabric. Then Emma's voice, raw and barely above a whisper. "I don't get it. I came on time. I brought cookies." I smiled. I said hi, and they just looked at me like I was a problem. Grandma said there wasn't space. Aunt Melissa told me to go home. I don't understand. What did I do wrong? There was a sniff. Then the audio cut out. I sent it to Margot and then to Rachel. My Aunt Rachel, my father's younger sister, had always been the one person in the family who treated me like more than a burden. She never got involved in the fights, but she never condoned them either. We weren't close exactly, but there was a quiet respect between us, a mutual understanding. She didn't respond right away, just the familiar scene notification hovering beneath the message. But 3 days later, she showed up on my porch with a tin of homemade shortbread and a look on her face that said everything. "I made tea. We didn't talk until the second cup." "I listened to the recording," she said softly twice. I nodded, and I spoke to Sandra. That surprised me. She denied everything, of course. Said you manipulated Emma, that you coached her, that you're trying to poison the family. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Rachel looked at me, eyes tired but clear. "I believe you, Claire, and I believe Emma." She stirred her tea absently. I always suspected Sandra twisted things. But hearing that recording, that wasn't a child making trouble. That was a child being broken. I swallowed hard. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner," she said. "I stayed neutral for too long, but I won't anymore. I'm done pretending." I looked at her, then truly looked, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something like hope stir beneath the debris. "You don't have to pick sides," I said. "I'm not," she replied. "I'm walking away from the ones who already picked theirs." When she left, I stood on the porch a little longer than necessary, holding the shortbread tin against my chest, letting the breeze cut through the quiet. For the first time, it didn't feel cold. It felt like the beginning of something better. The moving truck pulled up on a Thursday. I didn't go. I didn't watch from across the street or hide behind curtains. I didn't want the play-by-play. I didn't need to see Sandra's dramatics or hear Robert's curses. I didn't want to know who came to help or who stood there with their arms crossed, pretending to be moral support. For once, I let the legal system do what it was designed for, draw a line. By noon, the house was empty. The agent called to confirm, and by 3, the buyers had walked through with their toddler in tow, already talking about paint colours and crib placement. I stared at the closing confirmation email like it was a verdict, then quietly closed my laptop. It was done. The house was gone, not just to them, to me too. But of course, Sandra didn't let the eviction die quietly. Melissa took them in. Naturally, it was the move that made her look noble, selfless, the golden child swooping in to clean up the mess her cold-hearted sister left behind. I heard about it the same day from 3 different people, each with varying versions of how Sandra had broken down in Melissa's arms, how Robert had humbly accepted her hospitality, how Melissa had sacrificed so much to make space in their home. "She's turning her guest room into a sanctuary," one cousin whispered, like she was describing a holy site. "Even cleared out the craft closet. You know how much she loves her scrapbooking. That's how these things worked in my family." Sacrifice was a performance, and Melissa knew her audience. She made sure everyone saw the sleeping arrangements. She posted pictures on Facebook of fresh linens, steaming mugs of tea beside folded towels, a tray of cookies labeled "Welcome Home." The captions were syrupy, almost spiritual. "Family means no one gets left behind. We may not have much, but we have each other." One photo showed Sandra nestled into a chair covered in a quilt, smiling softly while holding Melissa's daughter, Chloe, like a trophy. The lighting was warm, the mood somber but noble. It looked like a retirement ad or propaganda. She even added a hashtag. "We choose love." I didn't comment, I didn't text, but the messages still found me. "Your sister's doing what you should have done. Melissa's a real one. Maybe now you'll reflect a little." Reflect. They wanted me to reflect. I'd spent 2 decades reflecting. Reflecting while paying their rent. Reflecting while missing sleep to book Sandra's medical appointments. Reflecting while watching Emma make a paper plate sandwich at midnight on Christmas. Melissa wasn't helping because it was right. She was helping because it was visible. And that made all the difference. Even Emma noticed. We were sitting on the back porch sipping lemonade, watching the sky shift into sunset when she said, "Do you think Aunt Melissa actually wants them there?" I tilted my head. "What do you think?" Emma smirked, but there was no humor behind it. "I think she wants to be the hero, but they'll eat her alive." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The truth had already started to surface. Little cracks in the performance. Sandra complaining about Melissa's coffee. Robert muttering about the lack of cable channels. Chloe having to share a bathroom and not being happy about it. And Melissa, she posted less frequently now. Her tone online had shifted from saintly to slightly strained, but none of that was my business. Not anymore. I had done my part, drawn my line, set my boundary, and while they spun their stories and curated their redemption arcs, I sat beside my daughter and watched the sky turn orange. I didn't need anyone to think I was a saint. I just needed peace. It took exactly 3 weeks for Melissa's carefully staged sainthood to unravel. I wasn't keeping tabs. I didn't ask. But drama like this doesn't need an audience. It finds one. The first crack came from Chloe, of all people. A screenshot sent by a mutual cousin showed Chloe's Snapchat story with a single line of text. "Why do grandparents fight louder than thunder?" That was followed by a blurry photo of a broken mug and a caption, "Guess whose fault this was? Spoiler, everyone's." At first, I dismissed it as teenage whining, but then came the group texts, the subtle family feelers. "Hey, just checking in. Heard things have been tense at Melissa's. Is Sandra okay? Your dad seems off lately. It didn't take long to piece it together." Melissa, the self-proclaimed martyr, was drowning. The house was too small. The egos were too big. And Sandra. Sandra had turned her frustration inward, choosing her new target with surgical cruelty, Melissa herself. She lets her daughter wear ripped jeans to church. She didn't even finish her degree. She makes Claire look like a queen with all that fancy house and money. And the worst one, according to a family friend. No wonder Claire got out. "You were never going to measure up anyway." That one stung. I could tell from the way Melissa showed up at my door. No warning, no apology, just sheer desperate exhaustion. She didn't even pretend to make small talk. "I can't do it," she said the moment I opened the door. Her hair was unwashed, shoved into a bun, and her eyes were red, not from crying, but from lack of sleep. "They're impossible." Mum complains about the coffee. Dad refuses to rinse his plate. They bicker constantly. They call my house too cramped, my food bland, and my job? Well, let's just say Mum thinks I'm wasting my life. I leaned against the doorway, arms folded. I said nothing. Melissa continued, Si. They need to move out. I can't take it. Chloe's stressed. Jason's threatening to sleep at his brother's. It's ruining everything. She paused. I know we haven't always gotten along, but you're the only one who can help. Maybe you could co-sign something just for the deposit, or talk to someone, get them into some assisted housing, anything. That was the moment. The moment she expected me to be who I'd always been, the fixer, the responsible one, the daughter who always did what no one else wanted to do, the one who didn't let people fall even when they pushed her off the ledge first. But that woman was gone. I looked Melissa in the eye, steady and calm. Emma sat outside a Christmas Eve dinner in silence in the cold while everyone laughed over pie. She ate toast for dinner and cried herself to sleep in her party dress. Melissa blinked, her mouth opened, but no words came. So, no, I said quietly, they'll figure it out. Her face crumpled, not in heartbreak, but in disbelief, like she couldn't fathom a version of me that didn't absorb everyone else's damage. I thought you'd changed, she snapped. I didn't think you'd become cruel. I tilted my head slightly. I haven't. I've just stopped pretending your kindness is real when it only shows up under spotlights. She stared at me a moment longer, then turned and walked away without saying goodbye. I closed the door behind her with no satisfaction, no spite, just a steady heart. She'd be fine. They all would. Because people like them always land somewhere, wrapped in stories that make them the victim, the misunderstood, the martyred. But me, I was finally out of the story entirely. 2 years later, the house is quieter, but never lonely. Emma studies at a small but excellent university upstate, majoring in biotechnology. She's thriving, really thriving in a way I never had the freedom to at her age. Her classes light her up. She emails professors long after office hours. She's already co-authoring a research project on plant-based protein solutions for low-income communities. She calls it science that feeds. And every time she says it, I feel something unfurl in my chest like pride wrapped in gratitude. We talk daily, even if it's just a 3-minute voice memo about cafeteria coffee or how her lab partner uses way too much cologne. On weekends, when she comes home, she brings laundry and new recipes she's eager to try. Usually things with quinoa or mushrooms, which I pretend to like more than I do. The kitchen becomes our space again, not out of necessity, but out of joy. The new house is smaller than the last one, but it holds more of us. There's a reading nook by the window where Emma curls up with textbooks and a heated blanket. There's a wall in the hallway covered in framed photos. Not just school pictures and diplomas, but the silly ones too. Emma covered in flour from a failed cake experiment. Me in scrubs making a face with my stethoscope looped like a mustache. The two of us hugging beside a pond after a storm. No one else is in those photos. Not Sandra, not Robert, not Melissa. We don't talk about them much anymore. Not because it hurts, it doesn't, not in the way it used to, but because they're not part of this life, not part of what we're building. They're shadows that have faded naturally, like bruises you forget were there until someone asks. Our days are filled with calm rhythms. My work at the hospital, Emma's assignments, late-night conversations about obscure genetic markers, spontaneous walks when we both need air. We don't walk on eggshells. We don't brace for chaos. We live. Some mornings I find her sitting on the porch, laptop open, the sunrise hitting her just right. Other times she'll leave me sticky notes with dumb science puns. You're periodically on my mind or I'm overreacting must be the catalyst in me. And on holidays, we make our own traditions. No more large tables packed with people who measure worth in convenience. No more rooms that say full when what they mean is unwelcome. Now we bake cookies without expectation. We play card games while burning whatever passes for a turkey. We invite friends, her classmates who can't fly home, my colleagues who've stopped pretending their families are less messy than mine was. And we set a place for everyone. There's always a chair. That detail matters more than it should. Once during our first Christmas in the new house, Emma stood beside me while we adjusted the table and she asked, "Should I bring in another chair in case someone else comes?" I said yes without thinking. She smiled, softly. "You always make room now." "Always," I told her, "because that's what it means to heal. You don't just build walls, you build bigger tables." And while we don't speak of the old house or the people who once filled it with noise and silence alike, I sometimes catch Emma glancing at the door out of habit, maybe, or memory. But she never looks afraid. She just looks rooted, like she knows finally where she belongs. And so do I. The envelope was plain. No return address, just my name on the front in my father's slanted handwriting. Tight, mechanical, as though even that small effort had annoyed him. I found it wedged in the mailbox between a catalogue and a dental appointment reminder. For a second, I didn't recognize it. The handwriting had aged. It looked thinner, shakier than I remembered. Still, I knew some things leave fingerprints even after years. I didn't open it inside. Instead, I walked to the backyard, the sky overcast and cool, and sat at the old iron table near the fire pit. Emma joined me a few minutes later, carrying 2 mugs of tea, no questions asked. She placed one in front of me and sat down with the other, tucking her knees to her chest in that way she used to do as a kid. "What's that?" she asked gently. I turned the envelope over. "A letter from your grandfather." She nodded once, then waited. I opened it slowly, more out of curiosity than caution. The paper was thick, yellowed slightly, the writing uneven and short. "Claire, hope you're well. I heard about your hospital's expansion. You must be busy. Your mother's health hasn't been great lately. Blood pressure again. Hospital visits aren't cheap. Wondering if you could help with the bills. Hope to hear back soon, Dad." That was it. No mention of Emma, no apology, not even a pretense of reconciliation, just a request. As if everything in between, the years of silence, the eviction, the abandonment of my daughter, had been a brief interruption, not a full rupture. I stared at the page for a long time, trying to decide what I felt. It wasn't rage, it wasn't heartbreak, it was absence, like looking at a house you used to live in and realizing it's been gutted. The shape's still there, but the soul is gone. Emma watched me silently. She didn't ask what the letter said. She didn't need to. Maybe she already knew. I folded the page neatly, pressed the edges together like I was sealing something shut for good, and walked over to the fire pit. The kindling from our last bonfire was still stacked, a little damp but serviceable. I struck a match. The paper curled quickly, the words blackening as the flames licked upward. I dropped the rest of the letter in and stepped back. Smoke rose in a lazy spiral. Emma came to stand beside me. We didn't speak for a long moment. Then she smiled it. Not a wide grin, not one of those performative expressions people wear for reassurance, just a soft, sure smile. The kind you give when something ends and you realize you're okay. I looked at her, at the woman she was becoming, and I felt the truth rise like breath from somewhere deep inside. "Family isn't where you come from," I said softly. "It's where you're accepted." Emma nodded. "And sometimes it's just you and one other person who gets it." "That's still enough," I replied. She reached for my hand and squeezed it. The fire crackled behind us, turning the last fragments of obligation into ash. The smoke didn't sting, it cleared. Later that night, as we cleaned the dishes from a lazy dinner, Emma pulled out a small card she'd gotten at the campus bookstore. It was blank inside, but the front read, "Found family is real family." She handed it to me, thought it might look good on the fridge. I pinned it next to a grocery list and a drawing she made in the 3rd grade of the 2 of us in superhero capes. No apologies needed, no bloodlines required.